The Watership Down podcast is intended for listeners who are familiar with the plot. There will be spoilers. This episode is scripted, recorded, edited and narrated by Newell Fisher. Hello, and welcome to the Watership Down podcast episode 150, in which we'll be looking at Season 2, Episode 12 of the TV series and Episode 24 of the series overall, Bigwig's Way. Also this week, we welcome the podcast's new logo image to mark this milestone. I really like the image I've chosen. It is of a British wild rabbit, and the photographer has been paid for a licence to use their work, in keeping with the spirit in which I tried to use images created by others since I stopped using AI. And on that subject, as before, I am showcasing Watership Down themed art on the same basis as before. The usual image is replaceable for an episode with your own art, details in the notes. So then, let's try to find the next episode. You'll see what I mean by that shortly. TV series Season 2 Episode 12, Bigwig's Way, and the lost episode Dandelion's Big Story. The 25th episode of the Watership Down TV series was first broadcast in the UK on the 19th of October 2000. It was written by Mary Crawford and Alan Templeton. There will be a link to the episode in the notes. If you have the DVD set of the series, then this episode is difficult to find for two reasons, both of which are bizarre. Firstly, it is presented as the fourth episode of Season 3, being the first of 3 episodes in Volume 10 of my DVD set. I can see no good reason for this. But it gets better. On the DVD case, it is listed as an episode called Dandelion's Big Story, which sounds great but was never actually produced, while on the disc itself, it is the actual episode, Bigwig's Way. This kind of thing is why I stick to the original broadcast order. It's just easier. By the time this series got onto DVD, there simply seems to have been a lack of care in curating it. After all, it's just for kids, right? Yeah, that really shouldn't be the attitude. Art is art and should be treated with appropriate respect. So, before we go any further, let's acknowledge the episode that never was, but should have been. In Dandelion's Big Story, according to the DVD notes, quote, "It's a rainy day and the baby rabbits gather around for a story session. Dandelion tells them the legendary tale of El-Ra and the Black Rabbit of Inlay, two characters who seem strangely familiar." End quote. While Wikipedia says, quote, "According to the official Watership Down TV series website, which is now closed, Season 2 was supposed to have an episode produced called Dandelion's Big Story, in which he would tell a story to the younger rabbits, with the roles of El-Ra, Prince Rainbow, etc. played by the Watership Down rabbits, while Hazel and Bigwig went to Nuthanger Farm on a raid." End quote. And that's all I can find on this lost episode. It sounds as if it would have been really interesting, and I don't know why it wasn't produced. Perhaps they wanted to hold off just a little bit longer before we properly meet the Black Rabbit of Inlay. If so, it seems a shame. In any case, let's start looking at the episode which replaced it, Bigwig's Way. It is a pleasant day by the bridge on the River Test. A flock of birds take off from trees by the bridge and fly over Watership Down, emphasising the proximity of Watership Down and Ephrata in this series. In the honeycomb, the rabbits are awoken by Bigwig shouting above ground. Hawkbit correctly predicts what Bigwig will say as he enters the burrow to start the day's training. He then leaves again, clearly on a mission. Dandelion comments that Bigwig seems to be in a bit of a rut. Hawkbit adds he is dragging them down with him. We hear Bigwig shouting an instruction for Hannah the Mouse. Above ground, a tired Keehaw arrives and joins the collected patrol, ready to head out. Pipkin asks if they could possibly eat before going on patrol. Again, Hawkbit predicts Bigwig's response, that a hungry owser is a sharper owser. As Hawkbit and Dandelion share the joke, Bigwig wonders where Hannah has got to. Keehaw says she went to visit a sick relative last night and said she would try to get back by sunrise. Bigwig comments that she didn't try very hard. The patrol heads out. Apparently they have a schedule to keep. Hannah is making her way to the down with Hickory from Redstone Warren. They arrive to meet Hazel, Primrose and Blackberry, who are supervising the rabbit kittens above ground. Hickory updates them on Redstone, where there are also kittens now. The Watership Down rabbits are delighted at this news. Hickory says he would like them to come to Redstone to celebrate. Hazel accepts. Just then, Bigwig arrives back with his patrol. Hannah excitedly goes up to him to share the good news. But Bigwig is more concerned with her having missed a patrol. Hannah apologises and tries to explain, but Bigwig is on a roll. He says he won't take sloppy discipline from a rabbit, so he certainly won't take it from a mouse. Everyone else is shocked by this. Hazel tells him to calm it down a bit. Bigwig adds that if she isn't big enough to do her job, which is basically sitting on Keehar's back as he flies, so it kind of needs a mouse, then he doesn't want her in his Owsler. The conflict culminates in Hannah tugging one of Bigwig's whiskers painfully and then leaving. Keehar flies after her and asks where she is going. The surprising response is back to Nuthanger Farm, where it seems she was making a good living before joining the Warren on Watership Down. She says she wishes she had never met them. The consensus among the rabbits seems to be that Bigwig should apologise to Hannah, but he angrily rejects this. He is captain of Owsler and will run things the way he wants. Hazel asks Keehar to go after Hannah and invite her to join the celebration at Redstone, but Keehar says she will need time to calm down. Hannah is angrily making her way through woodland, where Keehar finds her and asks if she means what she said. Hannah's response is to keep walking. The party from Watership Down are making their way to Redstone, but Bigwig isn't happy. There are things to do. Hazel suggests that he needs a break. He's pushing himself too hard. Bigwig's response is that Woundwort and his army, as he puts it, won't be taking any holidays. Hazel adds that he is pushing everyone else too hard as well. He should try to enjoy the journey. The response is sarcastic, referring to enjoying an approaching storm. Keehar arrives at Nuthanger Farm and, checking for the cat and dog, enters a barn. He quickly spots Hannah carrying seeds back to a mouse hole and asks if she is seriously living here. She makes it clear she prefers this to take any more orders from Bigwig. Keehar manages to persuade her to come to Redstone to see the new babies, but she makes it clear she will pull Bigwig's ears off if he so much as looks at her in the wrong way. You get the feeling she would try her very best to go through with this. She sets off for Redstone on Keehar's back. On the way to Redstone, Bigwig keeps picking up Hickory on aspects of Redstone security. Hickory clearly isn't in the mood for this. Overhead, the storm cloud is gathering. The party arrive at Redstone, and immediately Bigwig is on about the size of an entrance. Hazel asks him to give it a rest, but Bigwig reminds them that he is a security expert. Hickory is now clearly very annoyed. Bigwig shakes his head in disapproval as they all make their way underground. Keehar is beginning to struggle flying in the winds of the storm. He suggests landing and letting it pass. Just then, a huge gust dislodges Hannah from his back, and we see her falling towards the trees below. Keehar is blown completely off course in his panic. It is later now, and Keehar lies stunned in the woods, having had a bad landing. In panic, he remembers Hannah is missing and takes off looking for her. The storm has passed, and high up in a tree nearby, Hannah is trying to get used to walking around the branches without falling off. Meanwhile, at Redstone Warren, the rabbits from Watership Down are cooing over Marigold's litter of 3 kittens. Except for Bigwig, that is, who says the nursery needs to be deeper underground, just as it seems he might have been about to praise Redstone for using goose down feathers for the kittens' beds. Marigold says they have rejected living in fear, and Hickory backs her up. Bigwig's response is that relying on Frith to protect them will not work. He only helps those who help themselves. I'm not even touching the theology of that assertion. Bigwig runs above ground, and Hickory asks what has got into him. Hawkbit's simple response is that there is the right way, the wrong way, and Bigwig's way. Meanwhile, Hannah is trying to find a safe way back down to the ground, and failing. She hears Keehar calling out for her, but cannot shout back loudly enough. Just as she begins to despair, a squirrel turns up. It looks like a red squirrel, but I expect they were rare in late 60s Hampshire, having been mostly replaced by the American grey squirrel that is basically the only kind you see here now, certainly in the south of England. However, species pedantry aside, the squirrel proceeds to demonstrate tree navigation to Hannah's amusement. She introduces herself as Tassel and offers to teach Hannah tree lore. She will have to learn to be a squirrel. Tassel is voiced by Janet Dale, who also voiced Bark the Badger, as well, incidentally, as Frost the Lamb in the last episode. Back at Redstone Warren, everyone is socialising except Bigwig, who is standing sentry with his serious face on. Hazel says Marigold would like him to join them. Fiver will sense if there is danger. Bigwig says they cannot rely on him and goes into a rant, which is interrupted by Hazel saying he is actually looking out for Hannah and Kihar. It is phrased as a rhetorical question. Bigwig doesn't deny it and says he is going back to Watership Down. He isn't good company at the moment, knowing he drove Hannah away. Meanwhile, Hannah is having an Avatar-like experience at the hands of a friendly trainer who tells her to trust the tree. After Hannah manages to fall into a pool of water collected in a bough, she calls the tree a big weed, but Tassel isn't having that, saying how old trees are. Very, very old and wise. She points out how much life there is living in the tree, how the tree gives food and shelter and absorbs the sun and the rain. Hannah needs to trust the tree. Although aimed at encouraging love of nature in the young, which is no bad thing, the scene makes you realise that spiritual squirrels would be tiny druids. Tassel is a refreshing counterpoint to Hannah's sometimes harsh, ground-based cynicism. Hannah is convinced and immediately makes her first successful jump from one branch to another. But Tassel is not just a dreamer. She also is aware Hannah will face danger before she reaches the ground, and an owl lives nearby, so Hannah must reach the ground before dark. Hannah nervously reasserts her love of the tree, because that's all that will get her out of it. And now, for the first time since episode 9 of Series 1, we see the impossible flowing canal near Redstone, which is literally flowing through a single closed lock gate that would have no practical use at all, especially if water can flow through it. Bigwig, who is on his way back to Watership Down, is looking at his reflection in the water when he spots Kihar. He calls out to him, and Kihar lands, basically on Bigwig, and gives him the bad news about losing Hannah. Bigwig tells Kihar to show him where this happened. Hannah is learning to love the tree, and is becoming quite squirrel-like in her agility. Tassel still doubts she will reach the ground before dark. However, Hannah, who is perhaps now getting overconfident and has spotted the ground, makes a heroic leap and hangs off a sprig of leaves and acorns, which implies this is nearly early autumn already. This dislodges all the acorns, which land on the head of the awakening owl down below. It looks up, and its sharp vision zeroes in on a certain mouse hanging from a small sprig of leaves. The owl flies up close to Hannah, but Tassel dislodges more acorns higher up to drive it away. Tassel advises waiting until the owl goes hunting away from the tree before trying to reach the ground. Kihar is having difficulties locating where he lost Hannah, but he says Hannah has a big spirit, which is a counterpoint to the way Bigwig described her that drove her away. It is now night, and Hawkbit and Dandelion are by a river standing sentry duty, which seems a bit random. Have they all decided Bigwig was right? They're surprised by a rustling in the grass nearby, which turns out to be Primrose, Hazel and Fiver, who have also had the same idea. It seems the rabbits of Watership Down have indeed decided Bigwig had a point. Redstone Warren is not built in order to avoid ill. They all realise that Bigwig has a very difficult job to do, and that his manner may be understandable. However, this scene seems to have arrived out of nowhere. There was no hint of the Watership Down rabbit starting to feel insecure before it. Just an observation. Dandelion suggests being a bit less tetchy about Bigwig's attitude. At least for a while, adds Hawkbit. Back at the tree, Hannah and Tassel are keeping watch on the owl. Hannah is starting to see how nice it could be to live in a tree. Life on the ground is far too tense, what with dodging predators. Tassel invites her back any time she wants to stay. Just then, they are interrupted by Bigwig calling out for Hannah. Tassel is worried the owl will find Bigwig if he keeps crying out like that, but Hannah is surprised. Bigwig is usually so careful about this kind of thing. Bigwig is getting desperate to find her, despite Kihar's warnings about ill. He says Hannah is only out here lost because of him being such a hardhead. Kihar says she knows he means nothing by it, but Bigwig is beside himself. For once, Kihar is the voice of caution and reason, as Bigwig continues crashing about, crying out for Hannah. In the branches above, Hannah starts making towards Bigwig in a hurry, but Tassel says to be cautious. However, Hannah is terrified the owl will get Bigwig if he doesn't shut up. She is worried that if Bigwig gets killed by the owl, he'll never let her hear the last of it. Too late. The owl launches itself from the tree after Bigwig. Hannah makes a leap and lands on the owl. Well, it's original, you have to give her that. Bigwig is still calling out, but Keehar says sadly that she may be gone. He may be trying to depress Bigwig into shutting up. And then an owl flies at them out of nowhere and misses. Hannah, sitting on its back, has steered the owl upwards by pulling on its feathers in a style reminiscent of the chef steering rat of the film Ratatouille. Having succeeded at this, Hannah the owl rider dismounts at a leap and watches the owl fly off into the night. Bigwig, Keehar and Hannah are reunited. As soon as the excitement dies down, Keehar apologises for dropping her, and Hannah has a go at Bigwig for making all that noise. Bigwig says he had to find her to say sorry, but Hannah replies that this is not the right place for that. She leads them both back to Watership Down, shouting out her thanks to Tassel, who just comments that groundlings are all crazy. Back on the down, the rabbits have gathered for Bigwig's formal apology. Proceedings are led by Hannah. Having said what is expected of him, and Hannah having accepted, Bigwig says that is not all. Hannah saved his life, and now Bigwig knows that size is not the measure of courage. He is proud to be her friend. Hannah says Bigwig is okay too, when he isn't barking like a fox. Bigwig takes offence at this, and chases after her as Hannah's insults continue. We hear Hazel say ironically that once again, there is peace on Watership Down. Is it canon? Had it been produced, the episode Dandelion's Big Story would potentially have had distinctly canonical tendencies, being so closely themed on one of the original tales of El Herrera. However, the idea of telling it to baby rabbits seems strange, bearing in mind what a dark story it is, and the context in which it is told in the original novel, at the demand of Bigwig just before he infiltrates Ephrafa. Also, I wonder how much the mutilation of El Herrera in the story would have been sanitised for younger viewers. Bigwig's Way, on the other hand, has nothing whatsoever to do with the original story. It is yet another story about Bigwig the buffoon, which is not true to his strength of character in the original story. And that strange scene in which the other rabbits realised he had a point when it comes to security for some reason does not result in any kind of resolution. However, Tassel's explanation of her love of trees reminded me very briefly of Richard Adams' beautiful descriptions of nature in the book, though obviously the language was not comparable in quality. Overall then, definitely not canon, but a fun little tale for all that. And we got to hear a squirrel explain her worldview. Worth it on its own, if you ask me. Next time, in the last episode of the TV series broadcast in the UK, we reach the season finale, as the Ephraphans at last discover the location of the Warren on Watership Down.